All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to our first of our Leader to Leader College Board series. My name is Tom Leitz. I'm the Associate Director for Training Development at MASSP. With me is Brad Bruner, who is our new director from the College Board. If you haven't had a chance to meet him, this is going to be a great opportunity for that to happen. If you could, in the chat, take a second to introduce yourself, who you are, where you're from, what your role is at that school. Before we give it over to Brad and let him talk about today's process around the PSAT, this webinar series is a series of webinars, not just around the PSAT, but around a variety of topics related to the College Board, from the PSAT in these first two, September 16th today and then the 30th. But then you'll see we shift gears to a couple of really interesting topics. College Board's Big Future program, about the resources for students to begin planning and thinking about their world after college. One that I'm really excited about on October 31st, which is the Career Kickstart. This is College Board's first real forte into CTE. Outside, I shouldn't say that. I should say AP, right? In that part of the College Board, what we typically think in high school. But I'll let Brad talk more about that later. But as we think about the importance of computer science in schools, to have that link to the College Board's pretty exciting, and it's definitely a new piece. In November, we have the state of AP in Michigan. And then getting into December, we'll take a swing back at those that PSAT score data that you've received from this fall's sessions, and how you might be able to use that to begin planning and preparing for spring testing. And then we get into both building a master schedule with that idea of equity and access in mind, and preparing for the digital AP exams. That huge change that happened over the summer, where I believe and correct me if I'm wrong, Brad, 23 of the AP exams are going to be done digitally this year, which is a huge shift, but one that I believe our students are ready for after the successful job all of us did last year with the work around the digital SAT and the rest. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing. I'm going to turn it over to Brad. We have both the chat available as well as the Q&A. If there are any questions on the webinar or anything you might want to know, while Brad's giving the presentation, I'll be monitoring both the chat as well as the Q&A in the background. So if you can, as we're getting going, take a second in the chat just to introduce yourself, who you are, where you're from, and we will get going. Brad, I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks, Tom. Can you see my screen okay? SAT Suite scores and reports?
Yeah, it's up there.
Very good. I appreciate it, Tom. And Tom, thanks for advocating for the webinar series. We've got a lot cooked up there for folks in the state of Michigan that we hope is helpful to you. That is my role at the College Board, is any interaction that you have with anything College Board related. So that might be SAT, PSAT, AP, Big Future, Career Kickstart, CLEP, AccuPlacer. The list goes on and on. Happy to help you with whatever clarity you might need, or just knowing what the full potential of any of those programs might be, so you have the opportunity to tap into it, as needed to meet your schools or your district's goals. So the focus of this presentation today is centered around SAT and PSAT scores and reports. And I'm going to just click off my video during the webinar and just take our attention to this particular slide here. As the point of contact, the best way to reach me is via my email, bbrunner@collegeboard.org. If there are questions that I can't answer that you have, certainly that is oftentimes one of my most useful tasks, is putting you in contact with somebody at the College Board who does. So if you're at a point, you've called maybe customer care, or you've reached out to somebody else in the College Board, and you're just maybe confused about what an answer to a question might be, or you need more direction, or you're just frustrated, reach out to me. I'm happy to help you as best as I possibly can. So there's my contact information. I've lived in Michigan my entire life outside of a few international experiences. Was a teacher for 10 years, taught AP US government and politics and AP US history, and then was an administrator in the state of Michigan, in particular when the state of Michigan shifted from the ACT on over to the SAT suite of assessments. So I've been down this road really since the very beginning. And so to talk a little bit more about SAT and PSAT scores and reports, here's the basic agenda of the outcomes there for today. I would like us to be able to take some time to overview the content of the SAT and PSAT so that you know or reminded of where a student or a school receives a score as it relates to the actual content. The two different sections of the SAT and PSAT, math and reading and writing, and then the content domains. And also, as well, when we look at those scores, we put them in the context of benchmark scores. So, knowing what that means, and it says CCR right next to that, college and career readiness, what that means according to the state of Michigan and also the College Board as well, and how we derive that score and how you can use it. Secondly, let's dive into the scores by reminding ourselves how we gain access to scores. And then once you have access, what you're actually seeing within your score report at the school level and the district level, if we have some district folks on the call. And then, two, what your student sees. I think that perspective is important as well. And then finally, instructional resources so that you can take those scores and do something meaningful with them on the instructional side, the professional development side, the curriculum side. And then lastly, opportunities for student practice. And even though that says student practice, that is student practice that can be done individually by the student, but also as well in the classroom or in the school setting or at home. So let's do a dive into the content of the digital SAT suite of assessments. So when I say suite of assessments, that's newer lingo for us at the College Board. It applies to the PSAT 8-9, PSAT NMSQT, PSAT 10, and SAT. So since the shift to digital, we now refer to it as just the SAT suite of assessments, knowing we're referring to all of those. So the benefit of the whole suite of assessments is that a student receives an assessment score at the 8th grade level as early as that, or if you want to drop that down in the 7th grade, many schools do. And that score lets you know, based upon the numerous students that we've had take the PSAT, if that child is on track, if they make normal growth to be college and career ready down the road. The alignment tells you that. There's a lot of value in that component of it. It's also aligned based upon the structure of the assessment. So the overall look and feel of the exam, the number of questions that somebody might see on the exam, the length of time it takes for each exam as well. That's been a big shift for the new digital SAT. Now, when I say college and career ready, kind of what it all adds up to, what we mean by that at the College Board is that a student, if they have a 75% likelihood of earning at least a C in a first semester credit bearing college course in a related subject, that is where we kind of draw the line as to that's what we mean by college and career ready. Obviously, those standards based upon where a student goes after high school, depending on the higher ed institution, they have their own standards, of course. But this is in working with higher ed where we have said, okay, this is where we draw the line as to what we mean a child having the opportunity to be successful in that first semester credit bearing college credit bearing college course. So, for example, in grade 8, if a student gets a 390 on the reading and writing section of the PSAT 8-9, then that student is on track. That is the benchmark score, suggesting if they make normal growth, the same growth, year to year, that they will be college and career ready by the time they have completed high school. Same thing for math. You can see the benchmark scores there as well. So that's what we mean by a benchmark score. That'll be something that we'll focus on when we look at the score reports. Now, just a quick reminder, the digital SAT is different than the previous SAT in many ways. It's a modular adaptive exam, meaning that students, for each section, reading and writing and math, they have 2 modules per section. Each module contains a series of questions of various different levels of rigor, easy, medium, or hard. And based upon their responses to those questions, their second module, the rigor of those questions is dependent on how they responded in module number 1. That allows us, using this adaptive assessment, a shorter exam than previous to extrapolate a more precise score. So that's how it is structured, as just a reminder. Content wise, more specifically, the first section, reading and writing, it is broken down into 4 content domains. As a student and as a school and or district, you will receive a score for the entire domain, the entire section, reading and writing score. and then a score for each one of these four content domains: craft and structure, information and ideas, standard English conventions, and expression of ideas. Within that, there are a couple bullet points that give you some sense of what each of these different domains mean. So, for example, for craft and structure, focuses on words and context, text structure and purpose, cross-text connections, and then off to the right, it gives a description of each domain. And then it tells you how many questions a student will encounter likely per each one of those domains as well, and what percentage of the overall assessment each domain is. This does change based upon the SAT and or the level of the PSAT, the grade level that the student is in the related assessment that they're taking. So some sample questions from reading and writing, because this part changed significantly. The questions now are discrete, meaning that each reading passage that a student encounters has only one question per reading passage. This has allowed us to leverage diversity within these questions themselves that more carefully match the population of students that we have taken the assessment, hopefully engaging them more so in the actual literature itself, allowing us to have, hopefully, a more precise student response as they've engaged more so with the actual reading and removing that disengagement variable. For instructors on this call, instructional coaches, curriculum folks, and so on, if you're looking for a document to help with in-class practice or in-class learning or a better understanding, much more in depth of each one of the content domains, take a look at the Digital SAT Suite and Classroom Practice ELA Arts and Literacy Guide. It's 129 pages, so there's some depth there to it, but take some time and see what you find useful out of that. If there are any areas on the SAT, PSAT, or other areas of ELA that you're looking to shore up, that this might be helpful with. The second section is math. Math is also broken down into four content domains. So you as a student or a school will receive a math score and then a score for each content domain. The content domains are as follows. The first is algebra. Now, algebra, take a look, is 35% of the overall assessment weight, 13 to 15 questions. In advanced math, the second of those domains is also 35%. So that is a large portion of the overall math section are these two areas here. The second two content domains are problem solving and data analysis, and geometry and trigonometry. And please note, although the content is fully aligned from PSAT 8-9 all the way up to the SAT, of course, our students in grades 8 and 9 are to a large degree not encountering any curriculum with trigonometry. So this portion here does change most significantly at the PSAT 8-9 level, and that would be an area where alignment doesn't make sense because those students are not encountering that typically in the curriculum at that grade level. The math questions, there's two types. There's a multiple choice question with four options as a student produced response, where a student reads the question and then has to type in the response. Weighted at 75% of the questions are multiple choice, the other 25% are student produced. Similar to ELA, there is a digital SAT suite and classroom practice guide as well. It is shorter for our math folks, so less content here, but more objective information and more easily described, I guess, as far as information per page number goes for our math folks, and closely aligned with each one of the content domains named the same. So math teachers, when you have the opportunity, that might be a good place to go and look again if you're shoring up any areas or gaps that you notice coming out of the SAT data, or in particular as you maybe align that with your curriculum. So using SAT suite data to improve instruction, I want to toss out these two documents here to start before we go into actual where to access your data. With the idea being that once you know where and how to distill the data that you see in the score reporting portal, how you can take that document, that data and use these two documents to help improve instruction. So there's two that we point out. There were two that I've already mentioned here, but these two are more specific to the digital SAT in that it's focused on testing points and then skills associated with it. The other two documents, much more broad and in-depth approach. to improvement instructionally using SAT Suite data. So this first document is called the SAT Framework for the Digital SAT Suite. When we send you this PDF after the fact, you can click right on the link and it'll take you right to that document. You can also search that on at any point in time. This is open to anybody, general public. And I would suggest that you navigate on down to the end where Appendix B, the Digital SAT Suite Detailed Skill, Knowledge, and Testing Points starts. And just a quick synopsis of what you're seeing, because there are probably 15 or so pages of this in there, more extensively for math. But I took a snippet from one of our content domains earlier where it said geometry and trigonometry. And it's just for example's sake. But in geometry and trigonometry, let's say that you're going through this as a math department and you want to know, like, look, we had an area of weakness in right triangles in trigonometry. Let's shore up. Let's look at our curriculum. Let's look at how the College Board assesses this. Let's just make sure we don't have any major gaps there. This document can help you with that. So, for example, where it says right triangles in trigonometry, in that document, this is just one, again, of the 15 or so pages that are there, you'll see where it says right triangles in trigonometry, and we tell you what we mean by that at each assessment within the SAT suite. So there's your SAT description, your PSAT NMSQT and 10 description, and your PSAT 8, 9 description. So you can see that for all of those bulleted points that were available for each one of those content domains for math. You see the same for reading and writing. It's different because reading and writing tends to be less objective, but the overall rigor of the kind of tested points does increase over time. And just the caveat in using this, of course, is that your curriculum may go much further beyond what is assessed by the College Board on the math, the reading and writing sections. So this is not a limit as to this is all that we teach by any means. You have local standards, we have state standards, you have standards within the school that you develop and so on. That's crucial. That is very important. Just to make sure there aren't any major gaps, you might look at this document alongside of your school's curriculum. The other document that we like to share is the Skills Insight for the Digital SAT Suite. This document is designed to help improve instruction. It'll let you know for every student's score, and we place the students in what we call score bands, what a student knows and or is able to do with the score that they have received, and for each section and each content domain. This document is available as a PDF, again, free. It's publicly available. And it's also available as an online tool, again, free and publicly available as well. Students can see it. In fact, they're kind of directed to it when they receive their scores online now. So when a student receives a score, just a quick sneak peek here, there is a report that you're able to access called a knowledge and skills report. And that knowledge and skills report will take the student's score, and the student will fall into one of 7 different score bands. This is what it looks like in the PDF. And then for each one of those score bands, I copied that piece of the PDF down here. The student will receive, and the school also has available to them a document, a PDF that looks like this for each content domain. So when I say that, let's let our eyes float off to the right. This was our reading and writing content section. One of the areas was expression of ideas. I used expression of ideas up here as our example. So each one of these content domains has its own page in its PDF, which makes it really nice for professional development for teachers, really easy to look at. And then within expression of ideas, you can see how a student scoring at the lowest score band, they're beginning to obtain foundational skills to be college ready. And if they're in that score band 2, scoring at 370 to 410, then they are able to do this, determine the most effective transition word or phrase to, and so on and so forth. And then with each score band, and this is going to make a lot of sense, of course, to content experts in reading and writing, their student is able to determine the most effective transition word or phrase to establish a logical relationship between 2 directly contrasting statements. Example, use of the term, however. And then you go up each score band, it gives a sense of how that rigor grows. So if a student, for example, is falling into score band number 5, that assumes that student has demonstrated, well, more than assumes, that student has demonstrated that they have these skills and knowledge here, as well as each of the score bands prior to it. So the idea is, let's say that you're a principal on this call and you see that you have some weaknesses in expression of ideas. Let's say the majority of your students are scoring here in the 2 range. Well, then the next conversation maybe to have with your reading and writing department, if you see this as an area of growth, is, well, then let's focus our efforts on developing these types of skills and the knowledge that you see here. Gives you a sense of where to go next. And for students, when they receive their score, they can see this. It's in the online tools. It looks a little different, but they can see that too in case they wanted to know what's next for them. And you'll have some students certainly that do want to know that, and it gives them some example questions to work on. So let me show you what that part looks like right now. So the Skills Insight tool online, again, same as the PDF, same information, presented differently. So online, if you go to SAT Suite of Assessments, Skills Insight tool, off here, if you click the caret, you'll see the reading and writing section, and then the math section below it. And then you'll see the score bands off to the right. And so the student or the school or whomever would put whatever score band they want to look at along with the content area domain. And then they would see something that pops up like this. So a child looking at algebra 470 to 540 tells them what skills that they just demonstrated at that score band. And then from there, it shows them the questions that they were able to answer that place them into that score band. It's not the exact question, but it is extremely similar to the point where it may look somewhat familiar to the individual student. And then it shows the questions. This is what the questions look like here, the question itself, and then includes the key explanation. We include that part in there in case there's any components of this that the student or the teacher wanted to draw out or explanatory, maybe for some type of assignment or learning or explanation, or let's talk through this or an example, whatever it might be. So that's available to students and to the school as well on the online tool. The final resource that we advocate for is actually a series of resources by our General Education Leadership Network. It's a fantastic network of school leaders and ISD leaders and district leaders throughout the state of Michigan that focus on instructional resources that are good for students, good for schools, and have outcomes for schools regardless of the assessment system that they're looking for. But the goal is to have a balanced assessment system and instructional resources that do focus on that. So there's a lot here for schools using their information for SAT improvement and so on, but it's on the instructional side. So I can't stress enough that if you're looking for more than what the College Board has, this is a great place to go and look and see and ask questions about resources that would benefit your students and your school. And Tom, if you don't mind, I'm going to pause right there. It's a good transition time for us. Were there any questions that popped up that would be a question that I should answer now?
No, no, chat's been pretty quiet. So
Okay. All right. Thanks, Tom.
yeah.
Okay, let's dive into the K-12 assessment reporting portal. So this is where you go to access your scores. If you don't have a College Board account or never have, then this screen would not look familiar to you, but you need to create a College Board account to start. So if you don't have one, create one. They're free. It's right at collegeboard.org. And when you log into your account, this is what you see as an educator. We call this the dashboard. So if you ever hear me referring to that, this is it. Depending on what you have access to, will depend on what your dashboard looks like. So this is mine. The tools and services are on the left-hand side. The role that you have assigned to each tool and service is here. When your access to that tool or service expires is located there. Again, we're talking about access to student data. So we do have regular expiration dates as good practice for that. And then how you can manage access to those different tools and services if you have managing access rights. So for the purposes of today, you'll want to click on K-12 assessment reporting. And if you don't have access to your data there, then it will tell you who to ask to get that data. You should have a data access manager in your school district that can provide it. And by the way, if you need to go back and look at some of the things that I said about this particular report, because you want more training on it or you want to share it with others, again, we have a copy of this webinar that will come out. Feel free to use that, of course. And then there's also a training module that I linked in here as well. It's a little bit more simplistic than what I do provide, but it's a good start for someone who's maybe never used the K-12 school reporting portal. So getting access to the reporting portal, if you don't have it, I did toss in here the College Board number. If you did have to make a call, let's say that your data access manager no longer works there, then you need to make a call in order to get access to that data. Your professional organization. This is where we see kind of the biggest impediment to accessing scores. If you have taken a job at a different district or school, or you have changed what your role is in your school or district, that must align with the type of access you're looking for. So if you're looking for K-12 SAT data at a high school and you just got promoted to a district level assessment role, then you're going to have challenges accessing that data because you're working at the district level, not necessarily at the building level anymore. Or if you've shifted schools from one district to another, you do have to update your professional information. That can be done right in your College Board account as well. So when you do have access to the reporting portal, there are a couple different roles that you may or may not have, but at the College Board, for privacy purposes, that what we do is we give access to one person in the school as the data access manager. You can't have more than one person in it, but we would suggest keeping it limited. This person is sort of the proverbial one person trusted at the school who is supposed to know who else to trust at the school, because we are talking about access to student data, which falls under FERPA regulations and so on. So highly sensitive, personally identifying information for students. So if you are the managing access person, what you would do is you would provide one of three levels of data to whomever it is that's requesting it in your school. There are summary reports. This type of access is summary data only. I'll show you an example of what this looks like. But in short, there is no access to individual student information. Secondly, detailed reports. And detailed reports is summary data, but also inclusive of student names and data associated directly with that child. It's only given to, on our suggestion, to staff authorized to see student level results, whomever that might be. And then file downloads. This provides access to the raw data files, the systems files, files that you might integrate with your student information systems, your data warehouse, maybe your county. So if you have someone at the ISD level who wants to pull your information to collect countywide data, which is very common in the state of Michigan, this would be likely what you are giving them access to is file downloads. Okay, now let's take a look at the reports that you'll see when you get into the K-12 assessment reporting portal. Now, if you are looking at summary reports, this would be reports for all students here. You would have access to this tab. If you have access to individual student data, when you click this tab here, it'll take you right into the individual data. If you don't have access to it, you'll get blocked right here. So with that said, there's three reports that we'll look at, data reports that we'll look at: performance by all students, performance by all demographics, and knowledge and skills. There's a couple other reports, such as growth reports and engagement reports and connections outreach reports, that we'll look at lightly. These are more so what we're here for today. So if you were to click on performance by all students, you would be asked to do a couple things. You would select the test data that you want to look at. And so the most recent data that you would have access to likely is the spring data from the SAT school day from 2024. So you can access that here by clicking there. And then you can check what grade levels that you want to review depending on what assessment you're looking at. So if you want to look at 8th and 9th grade together or separate for PSAT 8-9, you could make that choice there as well. And then from there, it just drops you right into the data. And so the report itself looks similar to this. The report for you, it looks more user-friendly because you can scroll down through it and so on, but it's just a quick screenshot. I'm looking at the district view scores. If you want to look at the school view scores, the tab is up at the top. And these are mean scores to begin with. You see that tab here. If you want to look at benchmark scores, which we'll look at momentarily, you would click on section benchmark performance. But for mean scores, I'm looking at the district. total mean scores. This district had 244 testers. There's a quick look at their score distribution. If you hover over it, it'll give you some more detail. And then this will give you a sense of the mean score out of the SAT full score of 1600. So this district had a mean score of 893 out of 1600. Please keep in mind the PSAT, various PSATs, their end score, total score is different. It is less than that of the SAT. So make note if you see that there. And then we see the state scores broken down the same way, and then all testers as well. And if you drop down and scroll down a little bit further, you'll see the reading and writing sections, and you'll also see the math sections. In both these sections, it'll give you again the district, number of testers, score distribution, and keep in mind if this is your first go around with the SAT, the math section's out of 800, and as is the reading and writing section. So those are your mean scores. Now let's pretend for a moment that we clicked on section benchmark performance, and you'll see a screen that looks like this. And the section benchmark performance total scores are here. That's what you see up at the top. And in the darker color, this is the noting the students that met both benchmarks. Again, by benchmarks means they are on track to being college and career ready. Now, because this is SAT data, means they are college and career ready, both sections. So here's the district's breakdown of that number of testers, 244. And then this is the percentage of students that did meet both benchmarks or met one or met none of the benchmarks. You see that distributed here. Met both, met one, and met none. And then if you drop down to reading and writing, it's set up a little bit differently. The darker color here are the students who meet or exceed the benchmark for reading and writing only. This group here are students who are approaching the benchmark. So for us, that means they are within 1 year's amount of growth from meeting the benchmark. And that could be as far away as 1 point away or 364 days worth of achievement growth for that child. So it's within 1 year. And then those students who are off to the right are not yet approaching the benchmark. This is why we think the PSAT 8-9 is crucial to identifying those students early. And so you've got a longer runway to work with those students because they are over 1 year's worth of growth away from being college and career ready, meeting that benchmark in that particular section. So that's the distribution of scores of reading and writing. Same for math. And that is the performance by all students, high level information report. Now, the performance by all demographics report is very similar. It just breaks that same data down based upon the two demographics that we have information on for students. And this is how a student can identify when they are setting up during the digital readiness test, check their test. So with that, we have, in this example, I have mean scores broken down based on gender. So we have data for all groups, students identifying as male, students identifying female, another, and no response. You can see the percentage of the students identifying in that manner, their score distribution, and then their mean score. We do the same for reading and writing and for math, broken down by the same categories for gender. And then for the demographic breakdown based on race for this report, we break that down, and I just chose to use benchmark data. Their mean data also is accessible too, but I didn't include it here. You have all groups, white, Black, African American, 2 or more races, Hispanic, Latino, American Indian, Alaska Native, Asian, Native Hawaiian, other Pacific Islander, and no response. The data is broken down the same way. Number of testers, percentage of students identifying this manner, distribution of benchmark scores, and then graphically represented off to the right. The third report is the knowledge and skills report. The knowledge and skills report is broken down into similar categories, well, the same categories, a reading and writing section, and you access the reading and writing section here, this tab at the top. If you wanted to look at math, you'd hit the tab at the top off to the right. So here's our reading and writing section. Here are performance score bands that I alluded to earlier. This is the report that links up with the knowledge and skills report. The lowest score bands are at the top, the highest at the bottom. Benchmark scores are kind of in between. We have to go back to our PDF and look at those, which I'll pull up here momentarily. Then you have the number of testers that scored in each performance score band, and then the distribution of those test scores for reading and writing. You get the same data. As I mentioned, you get a score for each one of these content domains for information and ideas, craft and structure, expression of ideas, and standard English conventions. So when you're looking at this knowledge and skills report, the first thing you look at are just strengths and then maybe areas for growth. Whatever conversation your professional learning community is going to lead you to, let it go that way. But if you were to look at it just briefly and be asked to draw a quick conclusion, you might say, okay, it looks like maybe our areas for growth could be here or here. And you can take this data here, and if you click on compare groups, you can break it down even further. And let me show you what that looks like here. So if you're to click on compare groups, you can see, now this looks a little busy right here because I have all the tabs open. But you can see if you click on that caret, then, all right, so our students in the two areas where I thought we might need a little bit of support. Actually, this is a different school here that I've used. You can see how you compare to schools in the district, if you're a larger district, or schools in the state, or your total group for each one of those content domains at every performance score band. What you can also do here as well is export all of this data to an Excel file, and you can take the data and distill it as you see fit via Excel. Now, if you were to go even further, and if you have student access, personally identifiable information of the student, you would access a report. If you click on View Students, that looks like this. This is a screenshot. I did obviously cut the student names on off to the left. But here you have the date that the student was tested, their total score on the overall assessment, the reading and writing and the math score, and did they meet the section benchmark score for that reading and writing and or math. If you're taking the PSAT and MSQT, you'll get a National Merit Selection Index score, their eligibility indicator, and then you get a score, performance score band, for each one of the students. So this particular student falls into the category for information ideas at the performance score band 160 to 360 here. And same thing, craft and structure, and same thing for standard English conventions, and same thing for expression of ideas. So let's say you want to know all of the students that fall into that lowest score band for, let's say you wanted more information about information and ideas. You can click on the caret, and that will pull up all the students that were in that category. Maybe you have a conversation with those students or about those students, and seeing maybe if there are some additional supports, remediation, intervention needs, and so on for them. It starts a conversation, at least a data-driven conversation there. Also accessible to you is a growth report. Now, the growth report, when you're looking at this particular year, we would just remind you that the mode of test has changed. And here's kind of what the growth report looks like. But the mode of test has changed from the paper pencil SAT to the digital SAT suite. And with that said, you may notice that there are some changes in your growth year to year from the 2022-23 school year to 2023-24. You may take into account the mode of test has changed, as well as many other factors that influence a student's score. One of them that we know quite well is learning loss due to COVID. But please keep in mind the mode of testing has changed as you think about how you use the growth report. But the growth report, in short, it takes cohorts of students who are taking the same assessment during the same season, and it predicts what their growth should be year to year. You might use that then to assess growth over time. Lots of schools in the state of Michigan, although we don't advocate for or against this, these are choices that schools make, use that for various different purposes and reasons for school personnel. So this report does show that. Again, just think about the transition that we're going through here with regard to the mode of test when you think about how you might utilize that. Now, if you do have access to individual student data, if you go into the individual student data, you'll see a report called the Student Roster Report. This is where, these reports provide comprehensive data on all tests given in the year that you select. So this is where you can dive into registration information, PDF score reports, labels, easily exporting data to Excel, access codes and registration numbers to help your students sign into their online score reports. It's oftentimes accessed by school counselors. You can get to the student roster detailed report and pull information for individual students. It's very similar to the report that we saw earlier. You can get your school's AP potential access code when thinking about how to use this data to inform AP programming. You can access that, the roster report as well. You can generate PDF student score reports or labels for selected students. Also available off to the right are batch score reports. These reports generate the individual student score reports. So if a student doesn't have access to a College Board account and did not download the Big Future Schools app to receive their scores, this is the more traditional method of giving students their scores and or mailing it home to a family would be the batch score reports. We can access it via PDF and then just physically give it to the student or attach it. Also, in the reports function, you can now see what's called the engagement report. This engagement report shows those students, if you recall, if you were a test coordinator proctor when students optionally provided their phone number as they were setting up for the digital PSAT or SAT, they were able to download Big Future Schools. This new report shows some interesting information about engagement in Big Future Schools. Shows the number of testers that actually used it to view their scores. And as we know at the College Board now, using Big Future Schools is the number one way that students access their scores. So certainly the use is there. So for those students who have accessed the Big Future School app, lets you know how many students, number of testers did that, and then who have then used it to view college and career planning content. That's available too. And then within that, further, the next report is Connections Outreach Report. You can use this to see who has opted into Connections. And Connections, that is our privacy forward way of allowing students to communicate with colleges and universities, not for profit colleges and universities, and scholarship, excuse me, not non for profit. No for-profit universities or colleges are a part of that, and then scholarship organizations. And what this shows you are which schools a student is engaging with. And for a student to engage with a school, the student makes the choice. That's the privacy forward way of doing this, is that schools can, they can see scores for students. They can see some limited demographic information, but nothing personally identifiable unless the child chooses. So if a child is receiving information from one of these institutions and they are intrigued and they want to learn more, they can swipe right on Big Future Schools and Connections, then to choose to share their information with the institution. And this shows what students are doing, which students are doing that with which institutions. Great place for your school counselors to have conversations with their students about engagement choices and planning and so on. So looking at the student side then to all of this is important. So as I mentioned earlier, students can get access to scores in three ways. They can use that Big Future Schools mobile app, and they'll be asked, and it's optional again, to download the app. It's for students 13 and older and located in the United States. So it's not available for the PSAT 8-9. This is NMSQT 10 and SAT only. Or they can get access to scores through the College Board website if they optionally want to have a College Board account, or they can get it through a PDF from the school. The PDF from the school, it's intriguing now. It's changed. And the change, I think, does highlight a significant mission change in a way for the College Board is not just using SAT and PSAT assessment scores solely for what it's traditionally been used for, is getting into college, but is thinking more holistically about career planning for the student, whether that requires college or not, maybe a two-year technical institution, two-year institutions in general, or careers right outside of high school. So we do provide now on the score report, of course, the student score right away. It's broken down for reading and writing section and math, their performance score bands, and then their essay scores are on there as well in the state of Michigan. But down below, this is the change. This is, right on the front page of the score report, reflecting a priority. the Career Insight Snapshot. And these are the fastest growing careers in the state that the child is taking the test in. Not only that, the fastest growing careers that apply to the skills and knowledge that the student has just demonstrated on whichever assessment they just took. So it is personalized to a degree to the child, not necessarily saying like these are the jobs that are meant for you, but these are careers that are available to you that match up with you and get the child thinking again about what's next. I've taken the SAT or PSAT. How can I use this in some way to start thinking about what steps are next for me in my life and in my career? So in big future schools, student is going to see something like this. It'll be this is the cell phone version. They'll see their score, see the percentile they're in. They have lots of different options to take a look at the careers that connect there with it. And they can go further and explore Big Future on the web. And this is where they can really dive deeply into career insights, scholarship insights, and college planning. Their reports look very similar to the PDF in a way, but this is what they see in their College Board account, total score, section scores, their scores, insight into what percentiles they fall into in the state, and so on. And then again, career snapshots. Going a little further, they see their total scores reading and writing and math, comparisons to the school, district, state, country, all testers, total scores, percentile comparisons as well, and then the score bands that they fall into. So if a student wanted to practice, or if the school wanted to practice at all with students, we do release questions through our educator question bank now. There are thousands of digital questions that are available at this point after only 1 year. But in the educator question bank, again, available to whomever, it's open to the general public, you can go in and you can take a look at each section. So I chose math for the SAT. You can look at all the different tests that we offer. But I did SAT, math, and you can choose which domain you want to get some practice questions from. You can choose what skill you'd like to dial down into, and you can also choose the difficulty level of the question. And when you do that, it produces a report that looks like this screenshot here. And you'll get the question ID number, difficulty of the question, domain, and then the skill. And then if you want to export it, you just click on one of these boxes off to the left, and that will export the question with no correct answers, or with correct answers, or without answers or headers, or you can choose with explanations and so on, depending on how you're using this with students or with teachers or whatever it might be. You can access thousands of questions that way. Students can also access digital SAT practice in Blue Book, and they can take practice exams, full length practice exams for our assessments. And when they get a score, they can go into My Practice, they can log in, and they can view their results. They can access progress bars representing knowledge of the content domains. They can use practice test scores to filter questions in the question bank, and they can generate specific practice questions based upon their results from their practice test. They can also, if they like, go into Khan Academy. Khan Academy is no charge for students and for families. They can go in and they can practice. We do know that practice has an impact on student scores based upon how much time they spend practicing through the Khan Academy. But the Khan Academy is our official digital SAT practice partner. They can go into the math sections, the reading and writing sections, and they can take a course challenge. It's just a basic pretest, and then Khan Academy personalizes a plan for the students from there. That can be done as a whole class or as an individual student. We also have full length linear practice tests that are available. And these are, again, linear. Paper pencil is what we mean there by that, meaning that they're not adaptive. They're available as a PDF right on the College Board website. We have them for the SAT and the PSAT as well. And again, they're full length, meaning the same number of questions. They're just not adaptive. Questions themselves include the practice question, and they also include answer explanations, which obviously you don't see if you're taking the actual assessment itself. So these can help perhaps then with the learning experience. So this is getting us to come to a close for this Scores and Reports webinar. I just want to re-advocate for what Tom had said earlier, that we have a lineup of webinars. And so if this webinar is something that you appreciate and you feel like you can learn from how we carry this out there with you, I highly encourage you to take a look at one of our other webinars. As Tom had mentioned, the next one coming up is the digital PSAT getting ready. So if you have an administrator who has never carried out the test coordinator level role, that's a good one to go to get sort of those implementation questions answered. There's many other things that the College Board provides to do that, but that's good for that. And then big future, I alluded to that, but I'm going to go in depth on this webinar and how students use this for college and career planning. I've had two students in the state of Michigan last year that won the monthly $40,000 scholarships. We give two of those away a month in the entire United States. And we had two of them win it last year in the state of Michigan, just using Big Future. And I say that because the College Board is investing heavily in that mission, rounding out into college and career planning for students. So there's some directions that the College Board's going from an update perspective. That's one of them is into Big Future. As Tom had mentioned earlier, Career Kickstart is brand new for the College Board. In fact, we just started talking about it over the past couple of weeks. And Career Kickstart is the College Board's first foray into CTE. That's a big shift for the College Board. I've been doing things with the College Board, for the past 23 years now, and that is intriguing. And I've seen the coursework that they're developing. It's a cybersecurity course in CTE. The pilot is open for next year to students to apply for it. And we have, I believe it's 15 schools who have applied within the past 2 weeks. We just started sharing information on that. So again, the College Board's first foray into CTE. On November 14th, I'll give a number of updates of the state of AP in Michigan, including growth of current courses, the fastest growing courses, courses coming down the pipeline, changes to current courses that we offer and how those might be modified for the future, digital AP exams. And then December 17th, PSAT data webinar. If you have never used AP Potential, this is where you need to be. And taking a look at how we use psychometrics to take a look at SAT, PSAT data, and that the millions of kids who take those exams and then go on to take AP, we can say with various different degrees of potential as to what their potential for success would be in an AP class. It's outstanding. That data is available to you, free. I'll show you how to access it and what you can do with it. And then building a master's schedule. Oh, go ahead, Tom.
Brad, two questions. One was how do you apply for the Career Kickstart program, the CT program for the pilots? And the other before that was Dan had asked a question about if there's a report that gives details where individual students are not yet approaching the benchmarks, if there was a way to break that out at all.
Yeah, good question. So if you go into the knowledge and skills report, and if you have access to individual student data, that's where you can kind of hit one of those carrots and you can pull up for whatever the individual content domain is for students who are not yet approaching or might be in that lowest performance score band. They would be in that not yet approaching category. So that would be one good place to go to look. That would be where I would go. And I think that's my best advice for accessing that now. The question about Career Kickstart, Tom, I will send you the QR code and the link so that you have that. So schools, if they want to apply for the pilot program, they can do that. So you can send that out after the fact. That'd be okay?
Yep, that sounds great. And there will be a follow-up email after this that gives all of that information, the slide deck, everything else that was presented to make sure that everybody
Great.
the information that they need.
Okay. And then the last two webinars that we'll do on January 16th is building a master's schedule using equity and access in AP. The two classes that we have that are fastest growing right now in the state of Michigan are AP Seminar and AP African American Studies, fall closely with AP Pre-Calc. We'll talk about those courses and how they're drawing in a different type of student and the amount of success we're seeing out of those students, particularly in the state of Michigan. And then finally, preparation for the digital AP exam. If you need some support there are 28 exams that will be digital only. Last year was optional. This year it is only. And that did accelerate a little bit faster than I thought. And so we'll need to be ready for that. And let me help you with that on February 13th from 1 to 2 p.m. So Tom, I'm going to close it out here for now. If there are questions that popped up in the chat, the Q&A, I'll get back to you if you have them. But I just want to thank everybody for joining me. If you have any questions at any time, you have my contact information, and I hope to see you at one of our future webinars.
Yeah, and if everybody can take a second, first, thanks to Brad for joining us, but I also put a link, and I'm going to put it in one more time into the chat, which is for the sketch form. So please take a second if you're on here, because that will not be in the follow-up email. We want to thank Brad again for his time. And again, we look forward to seeing many of you at the September 30th session, getting ready for that digital PSAT. We appreciate your time today. Like I said, later on this week, you'll get a follow-up email from me with the PowerPoint as well as a summary of it, of today's meeting. But again, thanks to Brad and the College Board for being such great partners to all of us here in Michigan.
Much appreciated. Take care, everyone. Thanks, Tom.
Have a great day, all.